You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. It's a June mailbag, so if today's episode is rubbish, it's generally your fault. We're going to get straight into the mailbag today, but before I bring in my expert panel, I just want to read a couple of emails that were, a little bit personal and stuck out to me. So Charles has messaged to say, just a quick note, your podcast really is something special. I'm not sure if you get positive feedback emails or just a steady stream of suggestions and complaints, but I'm sure there are many like me who appreciate sensible, balanced, I've never been accused of that before, informed and fun, independent F1 commentary from your shows. You've got something special. I hope things are going well, and the podcast community is fantastic. Thank you, from Charles. So I just want to say, if you do want to get in touch for something that isn't a question, you just want to tell me how Missed Apex Podcast fits into your world, or what it means to you, or where you listen to it, I always make the time to try and listen to those things. And yes, we do get a steady stream of suggestions / complaints, but it is massively, massively overwhelmed by the amount of you that are supportive of what we've been doing and have been doing so since about 2016. So no, never feel bad about just emailing for no reason. Get in touch. I always make time to read those DMs and read those emails. And then we've got a very random thank you to all of you on our podcast from Seeley. On the 1st of February, my dad died, and the following day, all I could do was listen to Missed Apex. My dad introduced me to F1, me too, when I was about 5 years old. Me too. He tried MotoGP, but F1 won. And then for the following 33 years, it has been one thing that we could always talk about, bond over. And I was listening to one of your magazine shows the day after he died, and it was extremely soothing to me. And it reminded me of the many conversations we've had, particularly of the 1999 European Grand Prix. It was mentioned as an all-time classic, and hands down, I cannot remember another race like it. Back in the 90s and the 2000s, I only got to listen to races live on the radio, and my dad would record them off the telly on VHS. That race, following the action on the radio, and then watching it on later with my notebook by my side. It was great memories. Thank you very much, from Cecil. And like I say, we love hearing stuff like that. Please do tell me how you listen to the show, where it slots into your routine. I absolutely love that. Just message me, talk to me. I promise you, it is one of the best parts of doing Missed Apex Podcast. Because we're an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed. With the kind permission of our better halves, we aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I'm joined in the shed by our Monaco super sub host, Jonathan Simon. Thank you, Jono, for taking over for the Monaco Grand Prix.
It was fun. I know you're not the biggest fan of Monaco. Surely after this year, you come back for next one?
See, the thing is, every time you build up enough credit of saying the Monaco Grand Prix is like oddly uneventful and it should definitely be dropped, you'll get the odd one that comes along that has a vague amount of interest, and it's always a little bit rain related. And no matter how much you caveat, Monaco is definitely pointless unless there's that exactly correct amount of rain. Every time the rain comes, people go, see, that completely justifies the last 5 years of garbage.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
And you know what? I'll tell you this. That's law of averages for you. The next one is going to be good. If you have 10 bad races, surely the next one's going to be an entertaining one. And you missed it.
No, if from now on, I don't mind. I was happy that if I got you to sub in, at least there was some interest for that one. But from now on, Monaco Grand Prix, that's yours. I'm also joined in the shed by our mad Viking, Christian Pedersen. Hey, K-Ped.
Good evening, my friends. Why is Matt never here when I'm here?
He doesn't like you, just at all. Like, just straight up, he's like...
I sensed it, but Confirmed. Okay.
Yeah, he says he once took a trip to the Little Mermaid. It took 45 minutes walk and a boat, and it was rubbish, and that's why he doesn't like you.
I'm just going to say, on behalf of the Danish population, I'm sorry, Matt. I hope we can forget it. Do a podcast in the future together.
No, Matt has a gig. He has a job, blowing through a trumpet. But hey, Christian, you were great on the last show we did, reflecting on olden days times. And when you get an email like Sally's one, which, by the way, obviously as a mailbag show, we dive straight into the mailbag. When you get an email like that, it kind of reminds us why we all love motorsport so much, And this is why I take it a little bit personally when people come into the F1 podcast space and then just dump on F1 like little brats. But like the passion around motorsport, what it invokes in you, the way it bonds people is something, really special. I had a similar, bond with my father over motorsport.
For me, it was my mother, actually. I don't know why. She was just always into fast, noisy cars. And whenever they were on the TV, she was like, look, cars, go around. I don't care. I want to windsurf, whatever. But and it never really did anything for me. But when I grew up and realized it was thanks to her. I watched Ronnie Peterson, not a good day, but the day he lost his life, I think it was at Monza on my brother's birthday. That is the first Formula One memory I have, which is because my mom forced us all to watch it on his birthday, and that was a kill. Not good, but that's racing.
It's good to know that your first Formula One memory is of, Ronnie. That was a sad memory, but he was one of the greatest drivers ever to pilot a Formula One car. My first memory was Austria 2002. And that wasn't a very good memory because Ferrari switched the cars at the finish line and did all that little schmozzle. But I will add to the mailbag question we did get in, or not really a question, but sort of a nice statement and story, which was people don't appreciate what it was like to watch F1, especially in the 90s. And I remember hearing stories about people in the 50s and 60s who would find out Jim Clark passed away a month later through newspapers because it was so hard to access information back then.
Yeah, and God, you're making me think of what are my first memories. But you first, Christian.
The entire event back in the days was the thing, right? You went there with people. It was like a holiday. It still is for some people, but nowadays a lot of people just can get the same amount of information elsewhere. Back then it was a different matter, basically. You camp there, and it's a bit of the Le Mans feeling at the Formula One races, actually.
You see, I never went to a Formula One race until 2013. That's the first time I was able to get to a Grand Prix. And so for me, little tiny violins, but economically, getting to Silverstone was difficult, even back in the olden days. And a foreign Grand Prix just absolutely was never on. If they'd have got a Copenhagen Grand Prix in there somewhere, I might have been able to sneak in. But for me, it's
they
always...
They actually have one.
Did they? No.
No, in Roskilde.
That's in the south. In the south.
No, it's in the suburbs of Copenhagen.
Oh, okay. So when did they manage that?
I think it was in the 70s or something. It wasn't an actual Formula One race. Okay. I think it was just like a circle or something. But it was called the Formula One race. Or maybe there was just a Formula One car. Never mind. It's somewhere on Wikipedia.
But for me, Formula One was always a TV sport growing up. So I've always known it as a TV sport. But that didn't dull the passion for it at all. And I do briefly remember, I have a real memory of being in a playground that means I must have been about 6 or 7. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in that playground, and telling people I was a Riccardo Patrese fan. And I have no idea why I'm a Riccardo Patrese fan. I think he drove for Williams. That might be why I've always been a Williams fan. But actually, one of my earliest memories that I can really remember is Nigel Mansell, blowing that win by either knocking his fuel pump off or whatever he did. Jono.
I was going to say, were you just saying the Riccardo Patrese thing to zig when everyone zags?
Maybe.
Because maybe he doesn't. You were his only fan back then.
So maybe I was just being like alternative. Like, yeah, I don't even wear jeans. We don't even have a TV in my house. Yeah, I'm a Riccardo Patrese fan for some reason. While everyone correctly was like into Nigel Mansell, Alan Prost, and Ayrton Senna.
Which I will add, back then, now I know I wasn't alive during the early 90s, but wasn't it like being a Sergio Perez fan, which you kind of are now?
I'm not being a Sergio Perez fan just to be difficult. I've genuinely been supporting him all through his journey. And actually, one of my favourite times in Formula One, watching Perez, was when he was teamed up with Kobayashi at Sauber. And I genuinely thought here are two talented drivers in a midfield team, pushing. And it's almost kind of that Haas vibe where you had Magnussen and Grosjean, where you went, these two guys, they could push this team forward. This team could go and nick a result.
Remember the battle in Malaysia, Paris, and was it Alonso in the Ferrari?
Alonso.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And they were up there a lot because both of those guys were managing their tyres really well. And it was Sauber, wasn't it? I'm not imagining it. I think they were Sauber.
It was Sauber, yeah.
And they definitely had even a front row lockout at one point as well. And it might have been I'm going to guess. I'm going to say Hungarian Grand Prix, and I hope that no one looks it up.
I can't remember.
Yeah. But they were genuinely like a pairing of drivers that were, again, not the top level drivers, but just had something, and on their day they could produce a strategy. They could drive forward, pull that qualifying out of the bag, make an alternate strategy work. So no, I'm not just supporting Sergio Perez to be difficult. How dare you, Jono? How dare you?
I said different, not difficult.
Oh, I know.
Different.
I saw it in your eyes. I saw it in your eyes.
The connection didn't come across right.
Why don't we get into our mailbag? We've got a lot of great questions here today. So this one is from Chris in Maryland. It's a good question. If you could magically restart the season and swap any two drivers, knowing how things have played out so far, who are you swapping? And this is great, to learn the most about the true order of the grid. This is such a good question. So if you can swap two drivers so that you can make a relative comparison to learn more about the true order of the grid. And that is, by the way, low key, one of the funnest things about F1, teasing apart who really are the great drivers, who's doing what with what machinery, who's overdriving the car, who's underdriving the car, who's getting 110% impossibly out of a car. Let's see, Chris continues and says, I think the answer for him is either Perez or Stroll for one of the Alpines, maybe Norris, Albon, or Tsunoda. Personally, I would swap Stroll and Norris. If Lando is the real deal, he should be at least Alonso's equal. And if Lance couldn't best a rookie, he shouldn't be on the grid. Love the podcast. Chris in Maryland, USA. Hello, America. A listener from America, guys. This is great. Jono, it's a good question. The premise is fantastic because teasing out the real order of these 20 drivers is one of the funnest things I like to think about.
So we're talking about drivers here and not actual cars or teams.
No. So what you can do is you can put Piastri up against Sargent in a Williams to see who's the best driver. You can swap that around.
I would love to. I mean, obviously, the number one is putting, Hamilton and Verstappen, or Alonso and Verstappen, or Alonso and Hamilton again, or something like that. Yeah. That would be the funnest one. But I do think putting a top, what I call 5-star drivers. 5-star to me is a driver with world championship talent who earns it. You know what I mean? They don't get lucky. No offense, Jenson Button. Tremendous driver, but that was a very good car in 2009.
Yeah,
I think
Jenson Button was a good enough driver that if those opportunities come along, he would take it. And there have been less good drivers. I don't want to do this because I was such a big Damon Hill fan. But if you look at like Damon Hill in a rocket ship in exactly the right time, he was relatively lucky getting into that position with the team. And then he picked up that title. Button's title isn't that. He played the career game well enough, was significantly better than Rubens Barrichello. So whilst your point stands, I'm not going to go out and go, well, Button just fluked a title. He had a good enough career to pick up a title.
Well, we'll leave that at that.
Like Rosberg.
Right? But I do like Jensen, I won't.
Like Rosberg. Rosberg is the same.
Like Rosberg. Exactly. 4.5-star drivers, which is what I'm trying to say.
I'll take that.
Now, the reason I'm getting into this is I would like to see a 5-star driver in that Alpine and actually find out how good that Alpine is. Now, is the Alpine a top 4 car? It was very quick at Monaco, and that's the only round it's been quick this season. That's what I would want to know. But if you're talking about driver pairings, yes, I would love to put Lando in one of the top 3 cars, not the Ferraris. I'm talking about the other top 3 teams. Yes, Ferrari's the 4th quickest car this year, everybody, just letting you know that. And I would love to see if Lando Norris is the real deal, because to him, I think Norris is a 4.5-star driver, and I would like to be proved wrong.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Christian, where do we put Norris? 4.5-star driver, I think at the moment is a stretch, because he might be. Well, I don't know if we've seen that. I think that is based entirely on thumping Ricciardo at this point, isn't it?
Could we use the scale S tier as like GOAT? class.
Yeah, potential
right?
GOAT.
Like, no one will ever. This is like the best of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And is Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Hamilton, Schumacher? I think he's very, very, very good. I think
Obviously,
he's 4.9 maybe, but he's not a 5.
I think you guys are being look, I might end up being wrong, and this is exactly what Chris's question is saying. Who do we put Lando Norris up against where he goes in there and in the second half of his first season in that team really takes it to them and looks like the better driver? Which team do we put Norris in to prove it one way or the other? So you could be really kind of harsh and go in at Red Bull where you're not going to get the number one equal status car. So that kind of makes it a bit interesting. Probably the most interesting one is swap Lando Norris for Lewis Hamilton and see how he does against George Russell. Now, if he gives George Russell a kick in on race pace, then you start to go, maybe.
That would be a very reasonable comparison, those two together in a Mercedes, I would say. If I could just make a point, I read the question maybe in a different way. I read it as, who would you take from a team they're in now and put in another team to see the greatest pairing? Does that make sense? I mean, I want to take Yuki and put him in Perez's seat. That would be a great Red Bull for me. I would also like to put Ricciardo in that seat, but that's a different story. I would like to see Albon in the Aston Martin next to Alonso.
Yes.
And this is just for the fun of it. But Frederik Vesti, who's is he leading GP2 right now? He's a Dane. Let's get him in the Mercedes. He's a Mercedes driver.
Oh,
I want to see him do some Formula 1 testing.
Christian just dropped the is he leading GP2, which is an accidental way of saying that I've been watching F1 for 10 years plus, and I know what GP2 used to be.
Did I accidentally use the olden days terms? My version of doing that is I'll accidentally say prime and option instead of medium and hard.
Nice.
To go, sorry, it's just I've been watching F1 so long. Sorry, I was leaning on this gate that I'm gatekeeping on. Right. So, Jono, you were trying to come in.
All I was going to say was I think if you did end up pairing somebody with George Russell or the other way around, and that's great that was brought up. I think if you put George Russell in the Red Bull, now that is very interesting because we think George Russell has potential to win. Now Christian's invented a good class here. S-class, 5-star. And then 4.5-star. S-class is your greatest of all time. 5-star are great enough to win a world championship. 4.5 is lucked into a car that was really good. 5 is, I think, where George Russell stands at the moment. But he's joined that team at the worst time. Could he have gotten a better car? He's sort of alongside Hamilton. We're not really sure yet with George Russell. I think he has potential to be an S-class driver, but who knows? I
love how we're jumping around. But let's stick with like Russell and Norris. Mm-hmm. So I think George Russell is going to fare better than Bottas, but we're in that sort of ballpark because, with the team settled on race pace, and look, I'd love to be corrected. I'd love to be wrong because as a Brit, I'll be happy to see, another Brit breaking through into S-class. Where does S come from? Like super? Is that S for super?
I think it's from Mario Kart, isn't it?
Oh. No.
I actually don't know. It's just, it's better than the rest. That's all I know from YouTube.
So,
That's what I base my everything on.
So I would be happy to see, to be wrong about this. But from what I'm seeing, the difference in the race pace, looking at the lap times, it's not a great deal different to Hamilton Bottas. So somewhere in between, Rosberg's somewhere in between that. So if you drop, Lando Norris in there right now, is he going to fare any better than George Russell? That's the question. But Russell, you're right, has gone in at a particularly bad time. So I think there's a resurgent Hamilton at the moment. There's a team that is still sore from Abu Dhabi 2021, who still, I think, would be backing Hamilton. And now they've gone in his engineering direction. There was a recent news story saying that Hamilton was pushing in August of last year to go in the direction they're going now. I think a lot of it is to do with the front suspension and the driver position, because he was complaining that his driver position was too far forward compared to the rest of the cars. So the car that they are now putting out onto Grand Prix and developing with is Hamilton's vision, is a car designed for Lewis Hamilton. So when we see the results from George Russell, if he's looking a little bit off on race pace, I think we do need to bear that in mind. I think the top three teams all have a chosen number one driver, and the Mercedes mission right now is, we love you, George, you're great, but we're pushing Lewis Hamilton forward. So we have to remember that, I think, when we're talking about Russell. But Russell is at least at the hot end, so we can judge him fairly to an extent of what he's doing at the sharp end of the grid. My concern, Christian, with Lando Norris is that he has been kind of festering towards the bottom end of the grid, really struggling, really fighting a car, not almost like marking time, waiting for another career opportunity, waiting for something to happen. And in that environment, I don't think you always get the best out of yourself.
I think it's impossible to get the best out of yourself in a new team, in a car that was supposed to be leading, driving in the midfield.
This
I think
is Russell now, yeah.
Really important to not underestimate how much pressure is on these guys. So for Russell's sake, I'm not seeing him doing badly in any sort of way. I think he's doing brilliantly. The crash in Canada, yeah, but I mean, this will happen, and that's okay. Last year, he was out racing Hamilton. Maybe Hamilton didn't turn it up to 11 in the car last year because of the way he drives and stuff like that, but still, he's managing it up at that level. And I want to add, it's a bit unfair to talk about S-tier class drivers with these young guys, I think, because you can't really be an S-tier driver when Max Verstappen is unique. He's a one of a kind. That is why we say it. But we didn't say that about Max Verstappen 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is something where if Max Verstappen's career ends now, he's always going to be an S-class driver. Now, would Vettel have been the same if he'd retired in 2014? Possibly. You never know. Instead, now we think of Vettel as a 5-star driver because of the way his second half of his career went. Not to steer away from the topic, but more on that, and back to the George Russell thing is, look, last year is there's no question George proved that he has potential to be one of the greatest drivers ever to hail F1. He's got the speed for it. But law of averages, Lewis Hamilton had a lot of bad luck last year, and that sort of helped. And George always seemed to be quick when the car was good, which made his performances look a lot better too, and you would score more points and blah, blah, blah. But this year, again, we're starting to see the averages come out, and George is now suffering the bad luck side of things. So that also has a part to play. Spanner's point is really good too, where the car is designed for Lewis's favor.
I think so.
I think so too, and that's put a little bit of the sway in Lewis's favor. But Christian, quickly on that, because then I was going to say another driver we could swap.
Let's do that. Let's have Christian's point, then go back to Jono.
Just a short one. Following the Hamilton plan doesn't necessarily mean a solution on the car. That plan could be getting another guy in who was on sort of a vacation-ish. I'm just saying.
Wow. James Allison. That's true. Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, he could have been going, why isn't James here? That could have been,
and that would be to the benefit of George Russell as well.
No, I'd look. There's all when we're having this discussion about which drivers to swap in. The reason why I initially wanted to avoid the top three teams is precisely because one driver is going to win that political battle. It's more, we know of it more because it's talked about more. It might be the same all the way down the grid, but you've got Alonso and Hamilton. Was 2007 the greatest way to judge who's the better driver between Alonso and Lewis Hamilton? Probably not, because the garage split a lot. You get the feeling that Alonso lost the garage a little bit in the way that he's probably lost every garage, and he's probably going to lose the garage at Aston Martin as well. So yeah, when you go, let's do these driver swaps, you can't just go, right, let's smash Verstappen and Alonso together at Ferrari and see how it goes. So Jono, next one.
I think we've squeezed the juice out of this orange a lot, out of this question, because it's hard to find the true pecking order out of just one driver switch. But I wish this was last year, because I would love to put somebody in a Ferrari and find out if that car can actually win a world championship. Probably not. And we'll have to move on. So you want to see, hang on. So you want to see if last year another driver could have delivered a title with Ferrari? They probably wouldn't have, but I'd like to see a Verstappen in a Ferrari or Alonso in a Ferrari or something would have been, a lot better. That would have told me the true pecking order of how good Charles Leclerc is and how good Carlos Sainz is. Yeah. I think that's a bit mean, because I do think both those drivers are really good. I mean, we can do that. You can do that another time. You can do championship battles and say, right, swap drivers in the top cars, and how does it affect
the title chase. So, you know, I think there are cars that could have won championships with different drivers. And I'll immediately say 2009, another driver in the Red Bull could have picked that title.
What?
Up. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Well, that's the impression I had at the time. Now I'd have to go back and rewatch it to justify it.
Well, my best example to that is 2018, and this is Valtteri Bottas's. 2017. Excuse me. Valtteri Bottas's first year in Mercedes, finished 5th in the championship. His teammate dominated, finished 1st. You've talking about you could have had a Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, or Kimi Raikkonen World Championship in a Ferrari over Valtteri Bottas. That explains why Hamilton and Verstappen are S tier. So
if Bottas was the lead Mercedes driver in 2017, and you had Verstappen in the 2017 Ferrari, 100% that's a Ferrari championship. Like, I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you. 100%.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting because it's early in Verstappen's career, and back then I didn't think of him the way we think of him now. All right, you know, that's interesting. Let's focus in on 2017. Bottas in the Mercedes, who's a very good driver, but that whole team was based around Lewis Hamilton at the time. So Bottas is the lead driver at Mercedes. Who do we put into the 2017 Ferrari to win a title at that time? There's a few there, like Alonso. Alonso picks up that title. There we go. For sure. Finally, if he sticks with Ferrari, which he didn't.
Oh goodness, I forgot. He literally dumped Ferrari to go and to join the great McLaren project. Oh, well, good question that, Chris. I think actually I'm going to listen back to this and I'm going to pick up on all the threads and reclassify those as topics. So, moving on, let's go to a question from Michael. Michael Albon says, over the years, it seems like in most race reviews, at least one of the panelists says something like, you can't draw too many conclusions because this isn't a representative track. I do say that a lot. I love your analysis that the first 6 or 7 races are unrepresentative and the problems it poses for F1 as a whole. I don't hear that argument elsewhere unless I'm on a show, in which case I shout about it all the time. I wanted to ask how many of the 23 tracks on the calendar are representative in your eyes. In my estimation, over half of the tracks are unrepresentative. I mean, that's the beauty, Christian, of Formula One in a way, isn't it? Imagine playing football every week, just on an entirely different pitch. Sometimes it's a pyramid shape. Sometimes it's sloping to the left. Sometimes wind. Sometimes in the sea.
There is track evolution, like in design, right? Back in the days, tracks were tarmac, grass, the end.
Hay bales, yeah.
Nowadays, I think you spend more money on safety than you spend on tarmac when it comes down to it. So the evolution of revolution, or whatever you call it, of tracks is one thing. Then you have the cars. They have a formula you sort of like follow. So if you wanted the car just to go fast, you would go into the desert, you would build a rocket. If you wanted to go fast on gravel and jump, you would maybe take a Extreme E car. What is the word representative, I think, means what would be the most consistent racetrack on a calendar. And that is constantly evolving, of course. But you build the car to be fastest overall. You could basically take all the lap times from the entire year, and it's all math, basically. So if you can build a car that goes fast we all talk about Spain or Spa or somewhere like that holds a braking zone, a high speed, medium speed, low speed, has it all. If you can build a car that goes fast around there, you have a good car. Up until now, we've only had tracks we have had a lot of Baku-ish style tracks.
We have.
And Baku is a track that is, it's a good example because Baku is basically just 90 degrees corners. You drive there, you brake, you turn the car, you put down the throttle. You brake, you turn, throttle. It's the most boring way to drive a racing car. And the cars are basically not built for any of that. Baku somehow goes against the entire premise of a Formula One car, if you look at it that way. So that is what I think Spanner means when he say representative. And when we go to the more European tracks, Zandvoort, Spa, Monza, stuff like that, that would be where the cars shine according to how they are built. And I think that's what you mean, right?
And I think it's got to be, to me, it's Barcelona always. And it's not just because people have this sort of in their head, Barcelona's the main test track, and they go, well, that's that's what uses the representative times. It's Barcelona has got high speed corners, medium speed, and slow speed. It's got a long straight to hit your VMAX. It's got great DRS zone if you want to test that out. Is that really part of testing? Probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway. So you've got a whole heap of stuff going on in Barcelona. At the end of the day, it also, and it's a very good question sent in by Michael Albon. No relation to Alex Albon, may I say?
We don't know.
Potentially, I'm not sure. Know. We don't know.
It's impossible to know.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'll. Anyway, I think that the fact that the beauty of F1, and this is the great part of the question, is the beauty of F1 is we don't know which car's the quickest at overall, because, well, I take that back actually, because so far I look at this year's sort of pecking order and Red Bull's been the quickest at every track. So that actually, I take back what I said there. But there are certain things that you can look at F1 that, and this is where the beauty comes in. If a car is good at Monaco, for example, expect that same car to be good at Singapore. Not all the time, but it gives you a rough idea going into that round. And that can be a racetrack, a team target. So we remember this back in before the turbo hybrid era. I remember back to the era before this, 2010. The Mercedes and the McLaren at the time and the Ferraris always did well at your Monzas and Spas and those kinds of circuits. Your Red Bulls did well at the aero kind of circuits. Overall, who's the quickest car? The quickest car generally wins. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what circuit you go to. You're always going to find the quickest car over the course of a calendar. There's not 20 Monzas. There's not 20 Monacos. So it's the beauty of F1 that we do have a variety of racetracks, and I don't think it affects the championship too much.
What sets Formula One apart from all other racing series, and what amazes every racing driver, is the braking force of a Formula One car. And I would say, if you look at Formula One as a racing spec formula, the brakes and what happens from around 120, 30 kilometers an hour up to 200, how the drivability of the car is in that space of speed. That is where it sets it apart from everything else. And that is basically math as well. So if you wanted, you could say, okay, why don't we build next year's Red Bulls to do 90-degree corners like no one else? It just goes around the 90-degree. Baku is going to be a piece of cake. There's not a lot, not enough to gain by being good at a 90-degree corner if you go that way. Even if there was more 90-degree corners, what you gain from being good in the areas the Formula One cars are good at today is going to win you always.
I'm just realizing, listening to you guys talk, and I go, I say this a lot. I talk about the representative tracks a lot, and I have a bias from the 90s. So while you were talking, I was Googling various race calendars from 1988, and so I've settled on 1998, where I would have been 17 years old and turning 18 that year. And if I look at this calendar, it's all the tracks that I think are representative, with a couple of exceptions. So it kicks off with Albert Park. Okay, fair enough. But once we go now into
which is not really a representative.
No, and I say so. And Australia likes to deliver us. Sorry, Jono, Australia. I get why it's early in the F1 calendar, and I enjoy the fact that the F1 season starts and I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And you guys, you don't know what it's like. We don't know how much we suffer.
Can I say quickly, sorry to cut you off, is I would rather my home track not be a representative circuit, because it means it's more fun.
Yeah.
Just to get to your point.
So in the olden days, it's always like we go to Australia. It's almost like a shakedown with points, is how I've kind of thought about it. It's nice, it's enjoyable, but we don't draw any conclusions from that. You never panic if your driver isn't doing well at the Australian Grand Prix. But if you look at this, the Interlagos was race 2 in 1998, and then it was the olden days Argentinian Grand Prix, Imola, and remember, these are a completely different spec of race car. Imola there, maybe not quite as tight and twisty as it feels today. Then you've got Catalonia, Monaco, Canadian Grand Prix, Manicourt, Silverstone, Red Bull Ring, Hockenheim, Hungaro Ring, Spa, Monza, Nordschleife, Oh, was that the GP circuit at Nürburgring? There we go, yeah. And then Suzuka. All of those tracks, to me, feel like traditional F1 tracks. So have I got kind of an old man bias now, where when you bring in something different, I go, well, that's not representative. I don't think so, because I look at the modern tracks that have come in, and I love a lot of the newer tracks. So I love the Shanghai, the Malaysian Grand Prix, the Korean track I thought was great, Indian Grand Prix, those Tilkodromes are great. Circuit of the Americas is one of my top 3 tracks at the moment. But yeah, so I think when I talk about representative tracks, I think I'm just lingering on the street tracks that have come in. And I will stick by this. They've gone mad. They've gone for the street tracks because it brings in money, and I'm sure there's deals with those cities, and there's a glamour to it. And in all of those negotiations, those tracks either want to be really early in the calendar or super late in the calendar. They're the premium spots, I think, in the calendar for promo, and I think money has been thrown at that, and that's why we've ended up with the start of the season for 2 seasons in a row where everyone is complaining bitterly that it's boring and terrible. But when when we get into the more normal tracks, it's going to recover. Am I just an old man? Am I an old man yelling at clouds? Jono, you're relatively relevant age-wise. Am I nuts?
No, I don't think you're nuts. But you got a great point there. But at the same, and part of the street circuit fascination is countries and cities don't have to commit to permanent racetracks, which cost a lot. And they tried to do that with Malaysia, and now Malaysia doesn't even host. I don't even know if that track still exists anymore at Sepang. I don't know. It's been so long.
Does.
I used to love that circuit.
It might come back, actually.
And I hope it does. And I have heard some stuff about that, Christian. And I really hope Sepang's back on the calendar. Very bumpy, good old tropical weather over there in Sepang. But back to your point is, you say all those circuits, old school circuits back in 1998. Are you saying that those were more representative, or are you just saying you just enjoyed those circuits? Are we changing the topic?
I'm thinking that the reason I say they're representative is because they're representative of what I know as F1. And if you maybe started watching 10 years ago, I'm a little bit out of touch.
I reckon, and I reckon that's an old man thing, because some of those circuits, like the Hungara Ring, was new. I don't think that's a representative circuit at all. What else in that calendar is kind of new? Albert Park was kind of new. I mean, it
at the time
for 40 years, but the modern day version of Albert Park, Monaco. I don't know, like the Red Bull Ring. Do we really think the A1 Ring was Christian? Do we really think that was a representative circuit? No, the altitude there doesn't help us. No. There's always a different winner there.
Mexico as well. Yeah, at the time. Yeah. So, Christian, you're older than me.
Some of the new tracks that I added are really interesting. I love Saudi Arabia. I know, Spanish, you're not up on Saudi Arabia. You think it's a death trap and stuff like that, and missiles flying and all that.
I haven't said anything.
But I like the environment. I think they did something unique with Saudi Arabia. They built a high-speed Formula One track in a city. Maybe those things don't combine so well when you think of it, but I actually like the racing. So I think there's a little bit of, is U2 ever going to make a new with or without you? Probably not. It's not going to be as good as the original one, right? Yeah. And the first time we kissed someone, the first time we danced to something, all those memories are just going to last.
Well, you're taking me back now. First kiss was to was not was walking the dinosaur.
Can't your family hear you in the background?
School disco. I've told all these stories.
I think it was the Final Countdown. Actually, I know that's quite cliche.
Nice. Yeah.
I would have thought both your first kisses would be at the Little Mermaid in Denmark.
Maybe.
Evidently not.
I'm pretty sure Meatloaf had a big part in all this conversation, but we must move on to another topic. I could linger on the topic of early love, and I would do anything for love. But I won't do that to you guys, because we're moving on with the questions. You could have let that go, Christian. You didn't have to do that. Speculation time. Let's see. Scott asks a question and says, greetings from Portland, Oregon, which I think is in Alaska. I'm not sure. I'm not up on my American geography. First of all, thank you for the hard work on the podcast. I really enjoy listening. Being that Spanners is such a staunch neutral, good point, Scott. This question is probably aimed for the rest of the panel. I am a Ferrari fan. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Scott. And just so you know, we're here for you. Anytime you want to talk, just get in touch and we'll be there. It's tragic. It's tragic, Christian. I know. It says, I do have hope for a strong second half with Charles and Carlos. Oh, bless him. He has hope. Okay, let's see what we can do to mitigate against that. He continues. It seemed to me that they were matching Alonso's pace with one fewer stop in Canada. Obviously, they had a difficult Saturday. Was this primarily due to being able to run in open air and manage, or have they cleaned up the tyre degradation issues through upgrades and have a shot of podiums for the balance of the year? Given that excessive tyre deg was Ferrari's main issue, it seems significant to me that they could run well in Canada, and not many people are talking about it. Thanks in advance, Scott. Now, I need to be clear that I have warmed to my Tifosi brethren, and in the olden days, yes, of course, you were the stormtroopers swarming in my social media, in my comment sections. But now you have converted. Did the stormtroopers end up joining the good people in the end? I think they did, right? No, did they not? Ugh. Okay. Well, I'll have to think of an analogy where generally baddies ended up being quite good. But I even have now, I would say, genuinely, I have got friends that are Ferrari fans. So I think we're at that point. But what I don't want is to give them false hope. But what can you do for Scott, Jono? Do you see them pushing for podiums over the season?
Potentially, yes. And it all comes down to Red Bull's development time dropping due to the cost cap issues they had in 2021. Is that going to affect their development time this year? And that means everybody will catch up. The question is, will Ferrari then leap Aston Martin and Mercedes to become the second quickest car? That's the question there. I still believe in the theory that the Ferrari power unit is the quickest in this era, in the engine freeze or the power unit freeze till 2025. And the reason I believe that is they the rumor was that came out at the end of last year that they've gone for quickest PU, but bad reliability. Now, the only thing you can change under the next few years under the rule set is your reliability. Whereas Mercedes, for example, went with the opposite. And that's why Mercedes cars sort of weren't as quick sort of to begin the era. Point is, if Ferrari get their reliability right, and that rumor is true, and they keep increasing the reliability, they can run the power unit a lot faster. And that's the key to winning in this era, I think, so far. Aero, mechanical grip, all that kind of stuff, it's important. But it's down to, are we going to see a strong second half for Charles and Carlos? Potentially. Are we going to see a strong 2024 and 2025? That's what Ferrari have designed this entire car and this entire strategy to, is for the last couple of years of this power unit freeze. That's what I believe.
Oh my God, that was pathetically hopeful. Christian, bring some sanity to this.
I'm just going to I put down one line. I'm just going to read it, okay? Scott, I don't know. But I believe in Fred Vasseur, and big things are happening on the personal front these days. I'm sad to say my Ferrari stopwatch is set to 24.
That's you. Is that your words, Christian?
That's my words.
You've basically wiped the Ferrari calendar clear for 2023.
Yeah, but I think Fred Vasseur is. I believe in that guy. I think he can do something.
Why? Justify that?
He has some oil in his fingers. But also he's a bright fellow. He knows the other team principles. He knows the drivers. A lot of the drivers used to drive for Fred Vasseur when they were growing up karting. He has the right contacts, and there's something about Fred Vasseur, and I think we need to give him this year to hire the right people, get things calm, but do something about the strategy stuff, calm the drivers, neutralize.
Okay. Well,
as we said last year and the year before that and the year before that, but still.
We're being joined live by our patron Slack group, of course. So EJ in our patron Slack group is saying to Scott, look, this is a safe place. And Wes has said, wow, this poor soul, it keeps getting worse and worse as you read. Mark simply says no to all of Scott's email. Pete says, surely Ferrari have used their quota of mistakes, so they're going to be great for the next 10 seasons. There's no shared optimism in our patron Slack group. But by the way, if you want to be a patron, it is a safe place. It's a multi-faith community. So there are people of all broad spectrums and beliefs in the F1 community. We've got Red Bull fans in there. We have. We've got Ferrari fans in there. I've seen a few Alpine fans. I've seen French F1 fans in our Patreon Slack group. Consider joining us. Patreon.com/MissedApex.
I'm going to post right now in the live stream group a card crash I once had.
Really? Why?
That's exclusive because exclusivity.
Oh, so you're offering that as exclusive content.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see Christian Pedersen crashing in a go-kart. And there's all sorts of other reasons to support us, but mostly it's so that we can continue producing content like this without being in a blind freelancer panic that everything is going to crumble away under our feet. Patreon.com/MissedApex. Hope to see you there. Right, we're still on Ferrari. So
yeah,
the thing is, this season, Jono, I think you're right. I think they have soundly fallen back to fourth place. I think, and I feel like they're going to be there for a while. This is a good excuse to briefly move to what you said about Red Bull when you're saying, are the cost cap implications going to kick in? I know, basically, is what I think. I think it's not affecting them at all. And this is what we were talking about at the time they got the penalty. Blue in the face I was, saying, no, this is not going to affect them. And everyone said, no, it's such a significant penalty. And I just don't think it was. Maybe coupled a little bit with the penalty for finishing first as a success ballast. But they've already talked about turning their attention to 2024. And we're seven races in. So, no, it clearly hasn't been a penalty. Even if they turn to 2024 now, I think Red Bull feel like they've got it in the bag, and that's why they can do that, especially with Mercedes saying, this concept is good. We think we're going to be fighting Red Bull after Silverstone, but we need to look to 2024. That's what Lewis Hamilton has been saying. So, no, it's not going to affect them, even though with both of those teams turning their attention to 2024, I can't see Ferrari challenging either of them.
That's the point. But look, the cost cap penalty didn't come in till late last year, and they've already developments and car advantages come months and months ahead of time. So by the time the penalty kicks in and by the time it affects development, it is going to be the end of this year that we finally see it. And we're already seeing the car sort of, I don't want to say decline in pace, but the other teams are catching up. Now, the problem for Ferrari as well, and switching back to Ferrari, is Scott mentioned the tyre deg issue, and he says not enough people are talking about it. And yes, that is a factor that's come into play this year. But the cost cap, I think, is Ferrari's biggest downfall. They were a team who are renowned for pouring money into a sport and not getting enough value out of the money they put in. The whole point of the cost cap is the complete opposite theory, is make the most of little money because everybody's going to be on the same sort of level playing field. Ferrari can't mismanage a $600 million budget and barely beat a team on a $450 million budget, for example. Now that they're all going to spend the same amount on a cost cap, it's only going to get worse for Ferrari. And so to me, that's the other side of it. And this is where the side that switches, Christian, is, to me, the downfall of Ferrari right now is they need to find a way to change their sort of, I don't want to say culture or anything like that, but to figure out how to make the most of value for money now. It's not like the last 20 years.
What if they took their brain and they used it twice? So to get more aero time, they were just finishing lower in the constructors. Then you would get more aero next year. So basically, you're just saying we take the brain and we use it twice.
So if you're saying to me that Ferrari will just dump this season like an NBA basketball team,
like they did the last 10 seasons to get enough time in the winter.
Is that what they've been doing for all these years?
They've been tanking.
Genius. I take it all back. Ferrari. You're absolute geniuses. But, maybe you may as well at this point settle for fourth place and start developing for 2024. Sorry, we couldn't be more positive about that, Scott. Also, not at all sorry. So let's move on to another listener question. This might be a quick one here from Justin, but it's a reasonable question. We talk a lot about tyre strategy. Instead of messing with the tyres in order to get rid of one-stop races, which I think everyone on this panel doesn't like, and causing more 2 to 3 stoppers. Why don't we simply make the races longer? Sure, Max can do 50 laps on some mediums, but could he do 70? I'm aware of the 2-hour time limit, but that seems like something that could be changed and bargained for. So I'm going to go first on this one and say, Justin, thank you very much for your email. That is a disgusting suggestion, because that is the gateway to Le Mans 24, which, although I very much enjoyed for the duration of the barbecue I was at, wild horses couldn't drag me to care about the Le Mans 24-hour race once I'd gone to sleep, fully gone to sleep and woken up on a whole nother day and then cared about the race that was still happening. No, Formula One is about the right length. 2 hours is about the right length. But it's an interesting what if, Jono. What if they just made the races 4 hours long? Would that solve all the tyre stuff? Obviously, the fuel then comes into it.
No, and there's a common trend throughout the world in that the best sports out there in the world are sort of around that 2-hour length. As a Formula One race is. Now, what you'd have to consider here is, can the power units last? That'll probably increase costs, because then you need to increase the amount of power units you need to use over the course of a season. It goes against Formula One's theory of sort of reducing costs, which is what they're trying to do right now with the cost cap and all that kind of stuff as well. I don't think that's the cause. And I think, look, we can get 2 to 3 stop races with the old 2011 Pirelli tires. We had 3 to 4 stop races back then when they first came in. So I don't think, is there an end goal with this question, Justin, that he's aiming for? Is it for more entertainment? Is it just to find out if Max can do 50 laps on a certain set of tires? What's the end goal from this?
I think it's just a desperation to see, and I feel it as well, an end to the one-stops, because the whole point of the Pirelli era was to create a tyre delta with cars on track with different strategies. And when you have a basic one-stop, you don't really see it. You've got 2 choices, either plan A or the George Russell plan, which is go a bit longer, hope for a safety car. And that's not the most interesting way at the moment to get around these tracks. I think if you're going to persist with one-stop races, then just forget it. Forget about the whole Pirelli plan. Get Bridgestone in. Just have durable tyres and just go, because there's no difference between just having really good race cars and really good race tyres and the current Pirelli plan now. They're not doing the wear thing, Christian, that's all.
I think, again, as Jonathan's saying, the question is, why the question? What do we want to gain? Back in the days, the cars were made to basically break down when they've crossed the finishing line. I know the cars aren't built like that today, but they are still all built at a limit. And that is why we had the debate when we introduced the sprint races. All the engine manufacturers were going, but if we're going to do 6 sprint races, which is X kilometers, then we need one more engine in the regulations, yada, yada, more money for engines, yada. So everything works together, basically. But I think the main thing is the first thing that Jonathan was talking about is how we as humans, what's our span of attention? And 2 hours is the limit, not basically.
Yeah, I think you're right. Honestly, I literally went in with the best intentions for Le Mans, right? And I've always said it's way too long. You should just have shorter races. I go to Brad Philpott's Le Mans party, great party, lovely company, amazing. And I went in there and I was honest, like, I don't feel like I'm going to be converted. So my aim is just to sit here and not actively ruin it for everyone else, which I did. So I went in there with enthusiasm. But like, it got like 8 hours in. I'm like, lads, it's 8 hours.
Well, here's the thing I hate about, and there's a little, for people who might be new to Formula One or new to the podcast, there is, or even new to motorsport, there is a sort of friendly rivalry between endurance racing fans and F1 fans. There are some both that share both. But my friendly rivalry with it is when they go, oh, Formula One's so boring. Oh my God, I can't watch this 90-minute Grand Prix race. But next weekend, do you want to watch this 24-hour race with me? No. I want to go cook food and go enjoy life with my girlfriend. And I can't watch 24-hour race. Come on. And that's the thing I hate, is when endurance racing fans act as if a 24-hour race is the best thing in the world. But for some reason, a 90-minute Grand Prix race with 1 or 2 stops in an F1 is not.
Yeah.
Back to what Christian said, is that it is true. And this is what would actually, and this is where Justin's question could be very interesting. If we did extend the races and we kept the same amount of PUs and gearboxes, would we have an Andrea de Cesaris sort of late 1980s F1 where we have like, I think he retired in every race except 2 that season for various reasons. And honestly, that could make for a good Formula One sort of season mechanically.
I have one idea I would like to see. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I think what we all have this interest in trying to push the drivers into new scenarios, into new challenges to see what is going to happen. And I think we will never get that, what we are seeking, that extreme thing that would happen. There are limits to what Formula One can contain. And right now we have an entire field that are within a second. It's so tight, everything. Instead, we should change the whole FIA, gala, annual, whatever thing. And then after the season, all drivers should do a 24-hour kart race with the entire team. And during the kart race, there should be like the annual celebration where everyone get their medals, and make it a racing fest. Do it at Wembley. Do it inside with a purpose-built racetrack. Have maybe Taylor Swift performing, Romance, Alonso.
She makes
the Pussycat Dolls.
Things,
no, not the
That's not
Pussycat
true
Dolls,
anymore,
not the
I don't think.
No, we can't. That's too complicated. But we could have Shakira, which would be amazing. Yeah,
and she would tell the truth.
Exactly, especially if she conveyed everything through her hips. This has been a great topic, but I want to make sure that we get a few more questions in. And actually, like this next question from Joshua, I think is fundamental to F1's whole talent regime. Like, how do we bring talented drivers through? Are we getting the best that motorsport has to offer? So here's Joshua's question. Thank you for being my F1 friends. He leads his podcast off with. And that's a great start, Joshua, because I, growing up, was the only person I knew that was into F1. And I only cared about it because my dad gave me a choice of MotoGP, which is stupid because the bikes kind of lean over, but they don't fall down, which is dumb. There's no way it can physically happen. So I never fell in love with MotoGP and superbikes. And rugby, which, as I've stated previously, no one knows the rules. The referee blows the whistle. Everyone looks at him. He invents a scenario. He doesn't even know why he blew the whistle. He just got excited because everyone's hugging. So, and then the other choice he gave me was Formula One. So Formula One is what I fell in love with. But I didn't have people growing up through all my career until I started this podcast. I didn't have people I could chat with to F1 with on a regular basis, and then suddenly I can chat about F1 all the time. So Joshua, you are also my F1 friend. Thank you, and thank you for listening. Thank you all for being my F1 friends. I have a silly question. No, you don't. I've already said it's a good question. You're making a fool of me, Joshua. I'm 32. Congratulations. You've got your life ahead of you. I'm assuming you've just had kids, so you're going to feel the full impact of just a lack of energy pretty soon. I'm 32, says Joshua. Hamilton is 38 years old. Max is 25 years old. Where is my generation's world driver champion? Bottas failed. Ricardo failed. Perez failed. Do I have a right to be outraged? Love you guys. Thanks again. Keep it up, from Joshua. Amazing question. For a lot. What, Vettel?
Isn't Vettel?
Vettel's like 100. Vettel's a dad. No,
Vettel's 35.
Yeah, so he doesn't. I still think that would apply. Like, if you have, say, 10 years between those generations, Vettel with his odd 4 years, there is still a big gap there, isn't there? And like in any other championship, name a top series where there's a big 10-year gap where there's no star that comes through and starts and showing and dominating. And normally, and this is my big concern with Formula One, is when you get that kind of gap and when you stop having people coming through to challenge these guys at the very top, sometimes when you have people at the top and they dominate for a long time, it just means your sport isn't that healthy in terms of new talent. And I've often worried about this with Formula One.
Well, look, apart from you've got Verstappen, Hamilton, Vettel. Now you take out Nico Rosberg in there. That was No, Nico earned that title, but I'm just saying you take him out because we want this theory to work.
But
generally, we've only had 3 world champions since 2010, apart from Rosberg, 4 world champions. So that's made a big difference. And look, I feel sorry for Josh in this situation. I'm not complaining because honestly, Max is pretty much my age.
Yes.
And Hamilton was the driver I looked up to pretty much growing up my entire life as a young kid. And so I've won in this situation. And I do feel sorry for Josh because I don't know what he's talking about right now because I wouldn't have experienced it. I feel privileged.
I think there was something about the time in Formula One around the time Hamilton was introduced, that end zeros, where it still played a way too role how much money you had, if you had been nurtured by a team. And it was still like the Bernie era. But they came to realize that there will not be a new Hamilton every year. No teams have a new Hamilton, so we need to do something ourselves. And I think it was around that time when they really started focusing on it for real to get the new young talent into the sport.
Thank you very much, Wes. Yeah, Wes says like tennis. And tennis, I think, is a reasonable example because, okay, so, as a working class kid, what do you have access to? Well, I had access to team sports. I had access to football, was cheap. Cricket was relatively cheap because most of the local teams would have a kit bag and you could borrow it. As long as you could buy your own box for hygiene reasons, then you're okay. Football, you just needed a football and you could go have a kick around. Tennis, you had to hire the court and you needed equipment. So any sport where you need equipment, you don't realize, I think a lot of people don't realize how quickly down the ladder people kind of go, well, I won't do that sport because I need to go and buy a hockey stick or I need to go and buy a tennis racket. I need to buy padding. I need to buy these things. So the more accessible the sport, I think the more the sport will suffer from limited talent. And court time in tennis, I think, is one of those for grassroots. So yeah, it does make you kind of worry. And F1, though, I think one of the factors that played into this particular generational gap is drivers extending their careers suddenly. So because we had superstar drivers suddenly kind of come onto the scene, F1, I think, wanted to keep the likes of Kimi Raikkonen going. They wanted Fernando Alonso in the sport. I bet there are a part of the negotiations with Lewis Hamilton staying in the sport is from the FIA themselves. Like, I bet you Liberty Media are trying to make sure Lewis Hamilton will stay in the sport at 38. And he's now talking about being in Formula One again for a good while. So that means he's probably going to be a driver in his 40s in Formula One. If this was a sport less like tennis and more like soccer, it would be unlikely that Fernando Alonso is there at 40, that Lewis Hamilton is there at 41. I think that might be part of the problem, Jono.
Look, potentially. Definitely, potentially. Josh's question is a difficult one. Like, I don't know. Do we want to? Do we wind? It's a good comment. Do we turn back the tape? Do we wind back the clock and sort of be like, let's give birth and let's raise Sergio Perez and everyone, let's get around him. He had a lot of money around him. He did. So, look, Josh has said, do I have a right to be outraged? Yes, you do. I feel sorry for you. And I'd like to, send my condolences.
There's also a solution, which is, expand your range of motorsports. So this is why I feel like there should be like a Formula 1.5 as well. Because you can say to people, well, go and watch Rallycross, and you can get involved and appreciate those players and be a fan of those drivers. But I do feel like if there was a second tier of Formula One, you could find people who are doing really well in a certain space, and you could support them in the same way that you can support Coventry City or let's see, Nesved FC for you, Christian, or Cairns. I don't know how good the Cairns football team is, but you could find support all the way down and not feel lost in this field of a very narrow field of 20 drivers where each driver in a way is a little mini franchise, and it's hard to let them go. Every time they dump one of the top 5 drivers out of Formula One, or one of them retires, so Kimi Raikkonen retiring even, Kimi Raikkonen, who really didn't set the world on fire when you talk about, is it S-Class you're going for, Christian? He wasn't S-Class, but even when he left Formula One, I think they would have seen that as a big hit. And who did they get in instead? Who was the replacement for that? because they're little mini
I
franchises.
actually think Kimi Räikkönen was potentially going to be S-Class in his prime McLaren years, but something went wrong. He had the potential to become S-Class, I would say.
Mm.
And also, the Mercedes top line is called S-Class. Maybe it's from...
No, the chat room has said that perhaps you have picked this up from Gran Turismo, where S-Class is the top class.
That is true. That is very true.
All right, let's get one more listener question. We've got time, haven't we? Here we go. All right, so this is from Ryan. Hi, Map Crew. That's us. Do you think that if by the end of the season, let's say Abu Dhabi, Stroll hasn't performed as he should with the car underneath him, missing a race wouldn't change his position in the standings? Maybe he'll become mysteriously, he has an illness, and Drogovic gets to step in to see what he can do. Can Lawrence Stroll be cutthroat enough with his own son and drop him? That's the main question. Thank you, Ryan. Jono, can Lawrence Stroll be cutthroat enough with his own son and drop him?
No, it won't happen. And look, Stroll has missed early parts of this season with testing. He had an injury. He's still still recovering from it all. And I think we're in an era of F1 where we have to give more leeway to drivers who miss the early preparations or some form of testing time. Yes, people can go, well, what about Nick de Vries last year? Jumped into a Williams and performed really well. Good argument. Fair enough. But I think this year, Stroll, who allegedly has, world championship potential, according to Alonso, didn't get the right sort of potential preparations for the year. So I think we do need to give him a bit more time. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's as bad as we think he is. And I think he's proven in the past he can be quicker. At the end of the day, Lawrence Stroll has got a business on his hands here, and he's invested hundreds of $1 millions into not just the Formula One team, but into Aston Martin as a brand. And he has to consider, well, if we're not finishing higher up in the standings, how am I going to make my money back? And does that mean I need to get rid of my son to score more points, to score more prize money, to then earn more money? Because he's got, and if people look into the facts and what Lawrence Stroll has invested in this, he's got a big decision on his hands here. Nepotism or, go with a driver who could challenge Alonso and actually score a lot of points and wins and potentially things like that. No offense to Lance, who I think is a quality driver himself.
I agree. I think Lance is he's not S tier. He's not a 5. He's maybe a 4.5, 4.7.
What? Christian, behave, please.
No, Christian.
People are listening to this, Christian. They will hear this. You're talking out loud.
Why didn't you say that from the get-go? I mean,
I'll give him a 3 at best.
I'm not sure Lawrence Stroll is having... I'm not sure everything's just shiny times. Everyone's happy at Aston Martin these days because the car business is not going very well. And there is some new investor stuff going on. He's got the new facilities being built. And I think when you have a business at that level and you're involved in expansion and stuff like that, things are changing. You can't just keep your son in the seat if he doesn't perform. I mean, if you want your mechanics to give you 110% and you have a 90% driver, I think the mechanics are gonna suffer from that eventually. But also, I don't think we should forget that there's a reason Lawrence Stroll is wearing his trousers just below his armpits, and they are light blue. The reason is he's a businessman.
Okay. And I didn't know businessmen did that. I didn't know. Eventually,
I think he will make the decision that is best for the firm. But he could still save himself, Lance Stroll, if you ask me. I think he has 2023 to go.
Look, along with this, the question from Ryan has been, well, could we put in Felipe Drugovich to do a better job? No offense to Felipe Drugovich, but now you're going to put a driver with less prep who's had not the best junior career. Yeah, people say, oh, he won Formula 2, and that's amazing. I'm sorry, but anybody who takes more than 1 year to win Formula 2, to me, is not a driver that's going to challenge Fernando Alonso. You need to be winning that in your first year, regardless of the car or team you're in. And that's what drivers have proved in the past. I don't think that's the solution either. I think the solution is stability, and it's to keep with Lance, keep with some experience there, and give him more time to get used to the car.
Lance Stroll, compared to his teammate right now, he's behind. Obviously, we know that. Like, there's no world in which Lance Stroll is going to catch up and be as good as Fernando Alonso. If that happens, they've knifed Alonso's tires, or they've pulled his fuel hose. However, in his defense, looking at the general state of teammate relationships, there are a lot of drivers that are behind their teammates at the moment. So, to a lesser extent, Sainz has been over the last 2 years a good step behind Leclerc. Russell is probably, a half a step behind Lewis Hamilton. Perez is a big chunk behind. So that's actually, at the moment, that's the comparable comparison. You could say, well, is Lance Stroll any further behind Alonso than Perez is behind Max Verstappen? So if you want to be, generous, let's look at it that way. De Vries, let's look at Sargent. So there's a lot of teams where that is happening at the moment.
I think the reasonable thing to say is you have to expect your sister car to be not more than a couple of positions behind your leading car. And that is with no names mentioned or anything. So if your leading car is position 4, your sister car is position 6, 7. It's not 12 or 11. Yep. And if that keeps on going, then you start asking questions. Journalists start asking Lance during the press every time. Pressure on the team. This will set on people's shoulders. It's a bad snowball.
It is. So I try to be positive here on Missed Apex podcast. I try not to be the guy
really
sniping from the sidelines. And look, it is. When a team's doing really well, there's less to say about a team. When a driver's doing well, there's less to say about a driver. Naturally, the talking points on content always revolve more to when drivers are struggling or teams are struggling. So, having spent a fair amount of time talking to people from Aston Martin, for some reason, people from Aston Martin have listened to this show, and I have had people from Aston Martin saying, "I do like your show. You're way too harsh on Lance Stroll. You're way too harsh on the team." And I respect that, and I've had good back and forths. And then I was a little nervous when I went to a recent event, and there's 8 people from Aston Martin there. I'm going, oh no, is that one of the people who's told me off over DMs? But look, the feeling I get at Aston Martin is the staff are happy. People are happy under Lawrence Stroll, and that team is running has a good vibe. Everyone there is feeling it. They feel looked after, and they've got team spirit. So any kind of implication that it's, some Lawrence Stroll conglomerate and he's a dictator and he's running it all for his own personal gain doesn't seem to have filtered down to the team. The team morale looks like it's absolutely fantastic. However, I don't buy that Lawrence Stroll is there for any other real reason other than promoting his son and getting his son going forward. He obviously has to present that. He has to present that to his shareholders and the team to keep everyone motivated. But if Lance Stroll tomorrow just goes, I'm fully bored, Dad. You've been holding me back from my real ambition, which is to be a hedge fund manager, and I just don't want to do this anymore. I want to get back to just in financial investments. He quits F1. I think there is a tactical withdrawal. Obviously, there'll be some face saving. But that's my overall impression. Tell me if I'm wrong. Someone with inside knowledge, tell me if I'm wrong. Yep. But the whole Lawrence Stroll project in F1 is about Lance Stroll, whatever they might want to tell you. You're both trying to get in. Okay, Jono, then Christian.
Okay, first of all, Lawrence Stroll is a proven billionaire. He's done his achievements. Think of him as the equivalent when it comes to money as somebody who's won his world championships, and he's Kimi Räikkönen, and he's waiting to retire. Basically that was Kimi's last 10 years of his F1 career, in a sense, was just waiting to just get it over and done with. That was Lawrence Stroll. Now, what can you do to motivate yourself? Own an F1 team, which barely anyone in history, I think, has made any money off. It's almost a difficult task. Now, what he's done is he's bought Racing Point, saved them, rebranded it into Aston Martin, a company in Aston Martin which was already sort of failing and had a lot of sort of money that was going down the drain and is still struggling. He's got their branding, invested in the company, got their branding on the cars. Now it's got a potential race winner. And what you're talking about now is not only does the car brand benefit from this, but so does Lawrence Stroll. He makes a lot of money out of this if both succeed. So the bonus to this is his son is in F1 and he gives him a chance to race. I don't think that's the main
I don't agree.
His main agenda.
Yeah, okay. Respectfully, that's a great perspective. I don't agree. Christian.
Now you're saying the thing about the AM team actually listening to this. I want to retract some of the things I said. Well, I just want to prove a point.
I'm not saying Mike Crack is listening to this. I'm saying some of the guys in the garage.
I think Lawrence Stroll is a businessman in the Formula One paddock more than he's a dad. That is all I'm saying. I don't think he's a naive or anything. I think he's proved his Formula One point. He's been in there for ages, and he's not just there for the money. He likes what he's doing, and he has a grand plan. And maybe his son is part of that plan, but I don't see his son being the reason the plan doesn't succeed.
Oh, okay. So maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe his main motivation was fueled by Lance Stroll being there, but in the process, he found out that his real son was the company that he was founding all along. Like a Hollywood movie. Yeah, but I don't look.
I cry.
I don't know. John,
but wait, Spanners. My thing is, why would you hire Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso to challenge your son? If you were going to do anything, you would hire a person in a second car who's complete crap. It's the
correct point to a point. So, like, if you want to drive Aston Martin forward, you can't then just go, okay, this is maybe slightly unfair, but let's pick Giovinazzi as a second driver and out say Lance Stroll is your first driver. Let's hope Lance beats him and looks like he's good. But at the moment, if they do that, and I think Giovinazzi, I think that's reasonably fair. I think
Luca Badoer would be a worse example if you want to use him.
Luca Badoer is 48 years old, okay? But I don't know, let's think of like a pro...
Giovinazzi just won the Le Mans, so I mean, he's...
I know. That's why that came to my mind and went, that's immediately a bad example. But let's say you pick a driver who you're not going to give exactly the same car to, who's an out-and-out number 2 driver who will still make your son look good. So a driver who is... There are drivers out there who just want a job, who want to be in F1, who are happy to pick up results and know and understand
Perez.
Their role. Oh, mate,
isn't that why Perez took the Red Bull car?
Why have you got to do that to me? Why have you got to do that to me?
Oh, but it's the truth. But yeah.
Okay, so but let's say you have Lance Stroll there, and this season instead of Alonso, you've given it to Barrichello. Or Badoer, an age-appropriate Barrichello, and you don't give them the upgrades first. Aston Martin now. What? I haven't done the maths, but maybe they look like the 5th best team. Maybe they look like the 6th best team because Stroll has been nowhere, injury aside. But even in recent races, he's been nowhere. Lance Stroll's your lead driver this season. Aston Martin look like they've done nothing this season. So you can't do that right now because Lance Stroll clearly isn't there. So to drive the project forward, you do a bait and switch. You bring your Vettel in, you bring your Alonso in, and Alonso gets old and retires at some point or falls out with the team. Like I can't imagine it's going to be massively difficult to find an excuse to get rid of Alonso if you think Stroll is at that point. And then you bring in a young rookie, don't give him the upgrades, lead Lance Stroll forward. And also, I think one of the main points that gets lost in all of this is Lawrence Stroll is worth $6 billion, euros, space points. I don't think many people grasp how much money that is. Like, that's enough money to make, to raise a fund to go and buy Formula One. That's enough money to put forward for a serious offer to say to other networks and business owners and financial people, let's just buy F1. So he could buy F1. He bought Aston Martin, but he could probably buy Mercedes F1 team.
He should buy this podcast. He should buy this podcast for just one of those $6 billion.
And I'd love to get paid a few million for it.
I will sell. And if you point out the hypocrisy,
and he will have 5 left. I mean, what's the deal?
Yeah, but there was a point where perhaps Mercedes were fighting for their backing from Daimler. Like maybe there could have been a point where Stroll could have gone and bought Mercedes instead, but I don't think it was available. So he has a vast personal fund.
Along with that, Mercedes and Toto Wolff, Toto Wolff, I should backtrack, said Mercedes have proven to have increased their marketability and sort of, I don't want to say profits, or you know what I mean?
No. With the cost cap, they now make a profit off the team. Yeah,
they now make a profit, and it's increased their sort of visibility within the motoring space and the motorsport space too. So it does make a difference, success in Formula One, and that's what Lawrence Stroll's trying to chase. He owns a quarter of Aston Martin, the actual car brand, let alone he owns the F1 team as well, which he's got their backing. I think he's a genius, and I think it has nothing to do with his son. And I think his son is there as an added bonus, going, "Well, look, Dad, I'm running a great company, and can I come and work for you one day? Is that all right? Bang, go, have a seat. Why not?"
There we go.
That's the way it's working at the moment.
Okay, but look, let's say Lance Stroll he's overcome an injury, he's hanging in there, but we're assuming that this is the bottom of where he's doing. He's struggling, but he could do worse. So yeah, he looked good last season against Vettel, who is someone that I've never particularly rated. And people will get upset at this, but when the Red Bull thing was happening, I thought, this is Schumacher all over again. He is going to get found out. And I feel like he did kind of get found out and find his level, right? So putting Vettel at the end of his career, at the end of his motivation, in with Lance Stroll was genius. I understood that. I wonder whether they underestimated just how good Fernando Alonso is. But that was a very easy, almost like a mummy lion killing a baby deer, but not quite, and then letting the cub chase it. But this season, it's looking bad, and it could get worse. So at the moment, he's not crashing into people every 5 minutes. He's not hitting a wall every 5 minutes. He's going about his business on a race weekend and looking slow. That could get better, like Lawrence Stroll was saying, he's going to be alongside Fernando Alonso. No, he's not, unless something weird happens. It could get worse. He could start racing significantly worse. He could start having, DNFs. This is not a good position he's in. I don't want to underplay how badly Lance Stroll is doing at the moment compared to Fernando Alonso. Even though I started off all positive, my true feelings came out in the end.
Can't hide the truth. He's still 8th. He's 80 points behind Alonso in the championship, which is 3 races. If you think about it, if Lance Stroll won the next 3 races, almost going into the summer break, I think 3 races from now is Belgium, or I don't know what it is. Is it right on the summer break? That's embarrassing when you're that far behind. It's not even midway through the season. Yeah, look, Alonso's wiped the floor with him. And what makes it worse is Alonso's not even in his prime. He's a 41-year-old going on 42 next month.
How dare you? That is the prime.
He could be 50 times quicker, I think, Fernando Alonso. If this was 10 years ago, if this is 2010 Alonso, the deadliest driver pairing combo we had all time, Alonso in a Ferrari 2010. If this was that Alonso, it would be even worse. We could have seen a potential Aston Martin victory by now, and that would have made things a lot worse for Lance Stroll. So Lawrence has a big decision to make. What's going to happen for the next few years?
I think he'll just stick with Lance Stroll, if I'm honest. I don't think there's too much of a doubt in that.
One short point, and it's a completely different topic, but I think if they make the cars lighter, let's say 200 kilos off, we're not going to see 41-year-old drivers in Formula One in the future.
Maybe. And look, as much as I love Fernando Alonso, and as much as I love Lewis Hamilton being in the sport, other sports don't have people my age at the top of their game still being able to compete. Like Jono, you don't know this yet, but Christian knows. Your body doesn't get any better past 35. There is a distinct pinnacle,
I'm getting there,
and then you start feeling, and you go, that pain's new, and then as you get to like 40, you're like, that could potentially be death. That pain, I've never felt that before.
You guys haven't heard of treatment and massaging and all this other stuff. Like Tom Brady was great in his early 40s. That's another sport. Does anybody know who Tom Brady is that listens to this podcast? American football.
Jono, all I'm going to say is there's a difference between going to the doctor at 25, like you are, and when me and Christian go to the doctor. It's very much a managed decline. I want you to prepare for that. But
you basically have to accept someone entering your body space.
Okay, space. The space at the end made it a bit.
Don't forget that boy. Yeah,
Jono, you've got a lot to look forward to, but you have a sparkling career ahead of you. We'll make sure we include your show notes in your links to your social media. In the show notes below. And I loved you as a host of the Monaco Grand Prix. I'm going to use you at least one more time this season because I may have been invited to something and hopefully be far too sozzled to be a competent host, in which case I would want you to step in.
All right. Well, I'm always down for it, Spanners. You know I am, and you know I love these podcasts. I just wish we and you know what? Thanks to the listeners too. The mailbag questions were great, and we had a lot more we could answer too. I wish we had more time.
Well, we can just do it again another week soon. But say out loud where we can follow you as well.
Yeah. So at Johnny S8, JONNYESS8. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, best places to follow me. Feel free to message. I'm always happy to respond and just chat F1 in general. And the Slack chat, you've been great too. Love the Slack. They've always been awesome too. So follow me there.
Patreon.com/missedapex. Jono, do me a favor on Twitter, post more of your reporter clips. We're like, I'm here, I was watching a baseball game where a kangaroo popped out of a wallaby's nutsack.
It was, well, that's, I'm going to use that line today. I'm going to go to work in a few hours. I'm going to use that.
I want to see those clips on your Twitter.
See if it passes.
Go and follow Jono and look forward to hearing more from him on Missed Apex podcast and our rogue Viking, Christian Pedersen. You briefly, I peer pressured you back onto Twitter and social media, but you have given up.
I answered a post I saw, and immediately after that, I just deleted Twitter because it just turned me into this human I didn't want to be.
No, there is definitely.
Well, you know it, the Twitter disease. I know. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. I'm not coming back, that's for sure. But I just wanted to reiterate what Jonathan said. Every time there's questions in this podcast, people are just so sincere. People are so into it, and it's just a pleasure.
Yeah, basically. I want to reiterate, what Jono said. Like when we do these mailbag shows, the reason we keep doing them is because you just think of topics and angles that don't necessarily spring to mind. So when there's not a race, when there's not a news drumbeat, you guys just going, hey, this is on my mind, gives us fantastic things to talk about. And please do respond. I meant what I said at the top of the show. Like, don't feel like the emailing me is trivial. I think from, on a podcast to a podcast listener, I really do feel like there is a connection. I feel that for the podcasts that I listen to, and I always email them as well. And I'm always delighted to get a response. So just chat with me. You can email me, spanners@missedapex.net. My DMs are always open on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram, but I don't really understand Instagram that much. But follow me at Spanners Ready, Richard Ready on Facebook, and I think Spanners Ready on Instagram, and Missed Apex at Missed Apex F1. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.